Hello and welcome to your American accent training. My name is Alyssa, and today we are going to talk about simple past tense. Simple past tense and how you pronounce it. Regular past tense verbs can really give people headaches. As you know, simple past tense is simply the base form of a verb with ed added to the end of it. And that sounds simple enough, but there are 3 different pronunciations for that same form of the verb. And that can really trick people. But today, don't worry. We're going to sort it out. I'm going to explain to you why there's different pronunciations and how you pronounce each one. This is super important because if you haven't noticed, you usually speak in past tense. When you tell people something you did, a story, something that happened to you, it's always in past tense. So most of the time we are speaking in past tense, so we need to pronounce these words correctly. It actually makes a lot of sense. Not everything in English always makes sense, but these rules make lots of sense. Okay, here we go. Rule number 1. When you have a verb in base form that ends in a voiceless consonant. This is all about voiced and voiceless consonants. When you have a base form of a verb that ends in a voiceless consonant. For example, work. Work. That's voiceless. You don't use your voice box. When the base form ends in a voiceless consonant, the simple past tense is pronounced with a T sound. T. Guess what? T is also voiceless. So you put 2 voiceless sounds together. I told you it makes sense. You put 2 voiceless sounds together. The voiceless consonant at the end of the base form of the verb, and then the ed is pronounced like a T. Listen to the verb work. Work ends in a voiceless consonant. Simple past tense, worked. Worked. Try that. Excellent. Do it again. Worked. 2 voiceless consonants right next to each other. Okay, so the past tense, the simple past tense of work is worked. Now, the most common mistake that people make is to say worked, to pronounce the ed like ed, worked. This is wrong. This is very wrong. If the base form of the verb ends in a voiceless consonant, you just add a T sound to the end. Okay. Think about the P sound. We know that the P sound is voiceless. So when you see a verb, for example, hope, try that, hope. When we put it in the past tense, it becomes hoped. Hoped. Okay, now think about the K sound. Just like with walk, K is voiceless. So when you think about the verb like, for example, try that. Like. Now change it to the simple past tense. Liked. Very good. Okay, the CH sound. CH is voiceless, like in the verb watch. Try that. Watch. Now the simple past tense, I add the T sound to it. Watched. Okay, excellent. Very good. There are lots of other voiceless consonants and obviously lots of other verbs that end in them. For example, the F sound, or in the case of laugh, that ends in a GH, but it makes the F sound. And the past tense of it is laughed, right, with a T. So we can think of many examples that end in a voiceless consonant. If the verb ends in a voiceless consonant, we make the T sound. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2. If a verb in base form ends in a voiced consonant, and there's lots of these, right? If it ends in a voiced consonant, then the simple past tense is pronounced with a D sound. Okay, let's think about the word live. Put your hand on your throat. Live. This is voiced. You're using your voice. So when you put live in past tense, you use a voiced sound. D, which is a voiced sound. So you put two voiced sounds together, right? I told you it makes sense. You put two voiceless sounds together, we put two voiced sounds together. So live becomes lived. Try that. Lived. With a D at the end. Lived. Very good. Now let's try some other verbs that end in voiced consonants. So when we say the simple past tense, it will be a D sound at the end. Okay? Here we go. Learn. The simple past tense is learned. Play. Played. Study. Studied. Travel. Traveled. Call. Called. Listen. Listened. Remember. Remembered. Marry. Married. Happen. Happened. Excellent. Very good. Okay, so when we see a voiced consonant at the end of a verb in simple past tense, it's a voiced sound, a D sound. We put the two voiced sounds together. Okay, now rule number 3. What happens when the base form of the verb ends in T or D already? You can't add a T or D sound to it because it already ends in that sound. This is your opportunity to use the id sound, right? So instead of saying starts, you say started. Started, right? This is when we use the id sound. So anytime that you see a verb that ends, the base form ends in the D or T sound, we add the id sound. Let's practice some of these, okay? Decide. Decided. Add. Added. Graduate. Graduated. Dedicate. Dedicated. Want. Wanted. Need. Needed. End. Ended. Wait. Waited. Excellent. Now you know all 3 rules for making the simple past tense. It's all about voiced and voiceless sounds, right? Voiceless sounds, you add a voiceless T. Voiced sounds, you add a voiced D. Verbs that already end in T or D, you add the it sound. That's it. It's that simple. I know it seems like a lot of rules to remember, but eventually, after practicing, it will make a lot of sense to you. Now, of course, there are always exceptions. There are some words that end in an ED, and when they are used as adjectives, we say the id sound, even though the consonant might be voiced or unvoiced, okay? Even though it's not T or D. These are just for adjectives. Here are the exceptions. Aged, blessed, crooked, learned, dogged. Okay, those are the exceptions. Now let's practice a paragraph using simple past tense, okay? Here we go. David is super tired today. He worked hard last week in a very challenging project. His boss called him and suggested he travel to a different city. David talked to his wife and she cried all night, but he explained all the benefits about it and she accepted the idea. David agreed to travel by bus and waited for 3 hours. When he arrived to his new house, it wasn't what he expected, but he decided to give it a shot. He reached his goal in his new position and developed a great project. Excellent, very good. You put it all together. Okay, now you can speak in simple past tense without making any pronunciation errors. Very good job, and I'll see you next time.